Live from the Xfinity Studios, it's the station that America listens to. WVON, Berwyn, Chicago. It's Rufus Williams on Chicago's Essential Storyteller, WVON.
The views expressed on our programs are not necessarily those of WVON, Midway Broadcasting Corporation, or our participating sponsors.
If you're not out of the bed yet, then what are you waiting for? It's the WVON Morning Show with Rufus Williams on 1690 WVON.
Every day you're walking by and I can see how you shine. Here I am alone with nothing but a dream that you are mine. Just exactly what I'll do, I don't know, baby, but I gotta find a way to breathe. Tell me what I gotta do to get to your house. Tell me where I gotta go and make to be with you. Tell me what I gotta say and make to speak to your heart. Tell me what I need to know tonight.
Keep your eyes on the road and both hands on the steering wheel. We will not be held responsible for any accidents. It's the WVON Morning Show with Rufus Williams on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
The Audio Genius.
Get in on the conversation with Rufus Williams and the Morning Show at 591-1690. We are the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
Good morning, and welcome to Tuesday. It is the 24th of March, the year 2026. It's the Rufus Williams Show. I am Rufus Williams, and as always, thrilled, delighted, just truly excited to be here with you this morning. And thank you so much for waking up with Rufus. The team's all here. Hell. Annette, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing great. It's just another day. We're at Tuesday. These days really go by quickly. But I thought about you this morning, Rufus, because I ran across the story that Tiger Woods may be making some moves to return to the Masters. That was a heavy sigh. I know why you did that. I mean, he just came off hip replacement surgery, right? Not just, but recently, right?
Tiger's been, and it's not surprising because the way Tiger plays golf and the way he swings, you've got to know that over time that's going to take a toll on your body, and it has. But I sighed because I had the wonderful opportunity to be there when Tiger won his first Masters, and it was just such a phenomenal event to be there and to watch him do what he did. And it was the first golf tournament I ever gone to, so I don't even know how to follow that one up. And so to think about what has then happened to him, and we don't like to see Tiger in any form other than a form that allows him to win. And I just don't know that we're going to ever see that Tiger again.
I feel the same way. And I had a chance to cover him. I was at Cog Hill when he was here in our area. This was in 2007 or somewhere around there. And, just to watch him, on the golf course is just phenomenal. So I agree with you. And he was in his prime then. And, now it was disc surgery that he had, disc replacement surgery. And with that and other issues, he's turning 50. And I like to see him win. So, this will be interesting.
Yeah, don't want him to see go down, but don't want to see him go down any less than who he is.
Right. Go down in a blaze of glory, you know?
Yeah. So if he never played again and we just watch Charlie come through, I'd be good with that.
Yeah, sometimes I think these are kind of like maneuvers to get people to watch because people do watch when Tiger plays, and that's just how it goes.
Yeah, I don't even know what's going on if Tiger isn't playing, quite frankly. And I love the game of golf, so that's kind of where we find ourselves. Annette, Titus came back today.
I know. He came back to us a hero.
A
Tell the
hero.
story,
Whenever
Titus.
he gets off the phone, he can tell us. Titus, welcome back. How'd you spend your birthday?
It was a great birthday.
Is how
It was a great birthday. I can't complain. Spent it with a lot of friends that came through. Unfortunately, a lot of my family were out of town, so I didn't spend much time with them this weekend. But I did have a great weekend. My brother thanks everybody as well, wishing him happy birthday.
That's right,
and
you
everything.
all are twins.
Yes.
Okay, maybe he'll bring the cupcakes.
Yeah, he'll probably bring the cupcakes. And then my
Titus,
little nephew as well. He
please bring
turned same
cupcakes.
birthday as us. He turned
We've been talking
17.
about
So
cupcakes for 3
you know,
days
it was
now.
nice. It was a great birthday weekend. So I can't complain. But the funny story is, which I told you in the net earlier, happened Saturday. I went to a balloon release for my best friend. Her father had passed away a year ago, so we wanted to honor him by doing a balloon release. And so as we were doing the balloon release, I heard a loud boom, and I turned around behind me, and then I just see an apartment building catch fire. So I ran over there like, oh no, so we got to get these people out of here. So I ran over there. My best friend ran over there. We rang all the bells until somebody buzzed us in. We went up and down the stairs, knocking on doors saying, fire, fire, get out, get out. The smoke and everything came in quickly. And we got eventually everybody out. And then I stayed around so I could talk to the chief and the police and let them know what happened. And so when I talked to the fire chief, I asked him, hey, was anybody in the building? They said, no, you got everybody out. So great job by you guys.
It's fantastic, Titus.
Wow, great job.
Quite a story. And you always wanted to be a fireman.
I did.
And this is what we missed by you. Well, half of what we missed. We missed you being the fireman and saving lives that way. But we do get to have you here every morning to help us out with this. But that's a phenomenal story.
And you know what's crazy? I looked back on it that night and I was very proud of myself because, you know, I told you personally, like, I felt like I couldn't save my mom when that thing happened to her.
Right.
And so my first instinct to go and help these people was still there. And so I just felt grateful. And, you know, just my spirit of my mom and stuff told me that, you know, it may have been my time, but at the same time, you can still help save lives. So I was just glad we got everybody out of that building.
Man, that's a fantastic story. And the building, you said, burned to a crisp.
Yeah, it was burned to a crisp. It looked like it was able to be saved. I just saw the firemen going in the front and back doors, and they went to the apartment building right next to it and evacuated everybody else. So I think it was a total loss.
Well, look, you're still a young man, Titus. Maybe next time that Annette Nance Holt comes through, we might be able to work something out.
We'll see. You never know.
We'll tell her that story. Well, happy birthday again. Congratulations on doing that. And thanks for saving lives.
Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Pretty phenomenal. Annette, I noticed something this morning. I was reminded that we have 2 seasons in Chicago. Winter and construction.
Yeah, that's how it goes here. Yeah,
you know, the Bishop Ford, I understand, is now for the next 2 years going to be torn up, which makes it difficult to go out south and play golf anymore. And going out to O'Hare, I went to the airport this morning, and it starts to tighten up going out there as well. So here we are. Look, we got a couple callers on the line. I've got a guest coming on. We got a lot to do this morning. I do want to take my guest because I don't have him for very long. So let me introduce you to Jason Green. Jason has written a book called Too Precious to Lose, a memoir which blends family history, civic life, and historical research. Jason is a former senior Obama White House official, co-founder of SkillSmart, and CEO of Evergreen Labs. Jason, good morning and welcome to WVON.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you, Rufus.
Oh, man, it's good to have you. So let's talk about this book, which is pretty phenomenal to write a memoir at this young point in your life. But you began and really talk much about your grandmother, the call from her. Take us back to that moment and talk to us on how that set you on this path to write Too Precious to Lose.
Well, as you know, in writing Too Precious to Lose, I was 4 years into this journey serving President Obama. I was associate White House counsel. I had spent 2 years on the campaign as National Voter Registration Director, trying to get this brother elected to be the first Black president. And I'd been on what I would call maybe this journey of self-importance, Rufus, if you will. You know, I had gone off to Yale Law School. I had joined the campaign. I had gone into the White House, and I hadn't been home in some time. And so I got that faithful call, as you mentioned. My mother called me. I was sitting at my desk. I was working on a memo, and I let that first call go to voicemail, I'm embarrassed to say. And she called back again through the White House switchboard to get me and tell me that my then 95-year-old grandmother was ill and had gone into the hospital. And not just any hospital, it turned out that it was the same hospital that my grandmother used to take me to when I was 5 years old. I would get dropped off at her house, and she would take me to volunteer and sit with people late in life and watch my grandmother sit with them and offer these gifts of dignity. You know, she'd read the upper room or the daily testimonial and offer a steady hand. And it showed me, Rufus, how you could just be present with someone, that you could make someone's life better by being present. And so it was kind of that moment where I said, okay, God, I get it. You want me to go and sit with my grandmother in the same way that I watched her sit with all those other people, you know, so many years ago.
That's a phenomenal story, fantastic story. When we think about grandmothers, folks of that age, I lost my mom last September at 96, so I can appreciate what all of that is. But your grandmother also talked to you about Quince Orchard, a thriving Black community that had nearly vanished from history. Talk to us about how an entire community's story disappears like that, because as you talk about and name your memoir, all those things are connected.
Well, that's exactly why I ended up leaving the administration. So this, in my mind, was going to be a lovely Sunday afternoon. I was going to go sit with my grandmother in the hospital room and spend some time with her and then go back to finish that memo. But to your point, she started going into the stacks and telling me these stories. One of which was, after our first tense moment, my grandmother said, "I miss my hometown." And I said, "Grandma, what are you talking about? We're in Gaithersburg. This is Gaithersburg, Maryland." And she said, I was born in Quince Orchard. And I'd never heard that before. And so I had to go into the stacks, and I found this article from 1908 encouraging people from Washington, D.C. to go out and visit these beautiful communities, these towns, one of which was named Quince Orchard. And you can imagine the moment when I ran back into my grandmother's hospital room, waving a piece of paper from a newspaper saying, "Grandma, did you know that Quince Orchard was a place?" She rolled her eyes and wanted to say, "Boy, I told you." But I needed to see it in print. I think sometimes we need to see it to believe it. And then I couldn't believe, kind of as your question, that there was this community, this Black community that my great-great-grandparents, shortly after emancipation, we're talking 1868, my great-great-grandfather, great-great-grandmother, they helped the community buy 3 acres of land, right? For $54, they pulled together their dollars, buy 3 acres of land, and on that land, they built the Black church, they built the one-room schoolhouse to educate Black children, and they established the cemetery. And it just floored me that happened, one, that they were able to do such a communal act, right? Like to anchor the foundations of community. And then I didn't know about it, that it could happen in that generation in 1868, that my grandmother grew up in Quince Orchard, that my father grew up in Quince Orchard, and somehow I grew up in Gaithersburg not knowing that Quince Orchard ever existed. And so this was in part a journey to find that history, restore it, go into the stacks and pull the archives, but then also share it so the Quince Orchard of my grandmother and my father's generation could live for mine and future generations.
It's a phenomenal story, and just brings forth so much about what we need to know, what we don't know. And to your point, all these things are too precious to lose. We're talking with Jason Green. That is the name of his book, Too Precious to Lose, available wherever you get your books. We'll have more with Jason right after this.
More of The Morning Show with Rufus Williams coming up on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
Losing sleep is one of the hardest parts of being a new parent. Every parent has been there, struggling to stay awake as they sit in a chair with their baby, trying to get them to eat or go back to sleep. In these situations, when you are holding your baby and you think you might fall asleep, it is always safest to put them in a crib, bassinet, or portable play yard, even if they are crying or haven't finished eating. Many infant deaths happen when parents fall asleep while holding their babies in chairs, on couches, in beds. So if you can't stay awake, put your baby down. For more safe sleep tips and resources, go to oneshyfam.org/safe sleep.
Trial in the Delta, the murder of Emmett Till, just extended until March 29th at Collaboration Theater. Step inside the courtroom and witness Mamie Till Mobley, a mother angry and bold enough to let the world see the brutality inflicted on her 14-year-old son. Her courage ignited a movement. Trial in the Delta, the murder of Emmett Till, now running until March 29th. Get tickets now. Call 312-226-9633. That's 312-226-9633. Or visit collaboration.org.
Are you drowning in IRS tax debt? Angela was. She called Civic Tax Relief and saved over $80,000. Felicia was having health problems, got behind on her taxes, interest and penalties were adding up. She called Civic Tax Relief and saved over $15,000. Civic Tax Relief is a professional tax negotiation firm that can protect you from the IRS. If you're getting collection letters, call Civic Tax Relief for a free consultation. They will go to work helping you discover all the relief programs you may qualify for free. James owed the IRS $37,000. Civic Tax Relief represented him against the IRS, and by the time everything was completed, he did not owe the IRS anything. If you are in trouble with the IRS, call Civic Tax Relief for your free consultation now. 800-200-2257. 800-200-2257. Get a free consultation and real tax relief. Call 800-200-2257. 800-200-2257.
Hey, it's Cleopatra Draper. Join me for the Midday Show weekdays at 9 a.m. where we'll sip and spill all the tea. Do you want it hot or cold? Either way, we're serving up the flavor of the day. Weekdays at 9 a.m. right here on the station giving you what's now and what's next. 1690 WVON.
This report is brought to you by Blindster.com. Kyle from Blindster.com started Blindster in his garage over 15 years ago to make custom blinds easy and affordable for everyone. You measure, you install, and you save big on custom blinds. Plus, they guarantee they'll fit. Blindster.com.
WVON traffic and weather now.
Starting with a low volume of traffic as you head out this morning. The inbound Ryan moving along at 17 minutes from 95th Street into downtown. Getting to the Rhine along the Bishop Ford and Tuskegee Airmen Memorial, you'll move along at the posted speed. Light traffic for now along DuSable Lakeshore Drive, northbound and southbound. As you make your way along the Stevenson, a 30-minute trip in from I-355 to DuSable Drive outbound just fine. The Eisenhower, we are seeing a little activity there. 15 minutes from Thorndale to the Burns Circle, 40 traveling out. And the Kennedy off to a 40-minute start from O'Hare to downtown, getting to the airport, a little heavier than usual, a 35-minute trip. Taking a look at our weather, off to a brisk start. The National Weather Service says today we're headed toward a daytime high of the upper 40s, low 50s, tonight 29. Currently it's 31 at O'Hare, 31 in South Holland, and 31 degrees here at the Talk of Chicago. That's a look at traffic and weather now. I'm Annette Flournoy on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
Keep your eyes on the road and both hands on the steering wheel. We will not be held responsible for any accidents. It's the WVON Morning Show with Rufus Williams on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
Welcome back. We're talking with Jason Green. His book is titled Too Precious to Lose, a memoir that blends family, history, civic life, and historical research. Just a wonderful, wonderful writing. Jason, you talked about the development of Quince Orchard, but one of the things that stands out in your book is the Black church. Talk about what your family story reveals about the Black church as a source of leadership and resilience.
One of the things that I want to capture in Too Precious to Lose is some of the elements that I didn't get to experience growing up. As you know, sitting with my grandmother, I got to hear these stories about what Quince Orchard was like. And the anchor of Quince Orchard for my grandmother and my father was Pleasant View, the Black church. My great-great-grandfather helped establish Pleasant View back in the 1860s. And in 1888 is when the new building was built. You know, the community pulled together all of its resources. It had been worshiping for 20 years in a little one-room schoolhouse. And so finally they had their own building that they built in 1888. And as you know, this history, the Black church was truly the sanctuary. in a world where Black folk were told that they were second-class citizens, that they didn't measure up, it was in the Black church where all of those activities took place. It's where it was the safe place. It's where people were told that they could achieve. It's where my dad received his call to ministry. It's where he believed that he could overcome. And so the Black church plays this tremendous role of sanctuary from the winds that are pushing externally as this motivator. We think about the demonstration that happened in those Sunday schools of servant leadership, of parents who came together to ensure that their students had that their children had places to feel excellent. And I think about my grandfather who never saw fifth grade because both of his parents passed away and he had to go and work the fields. But still, that's that church building. When he was being told he was second-class citizen, in that church is where he was able to dress up. In that church is where he was a treasurer. In that church is where he was a trustee and he was told that he was somebody. And so the Black church just plays this critical role in the moral core of the community, but also in the social and the activism core. It really was the center of community life.
Jason, as you put together a story like this, at what point in developing it did you believe that this would be a story that would resonate within our community and with other communities?
When I was serving the Obama administration, I was 4 years into that experience when I got the call from my mother that my grandmother was sick. And so I went to go and sit with her, 95 years old, hospital that she used to take me to. And she started telling me stories. The first story is the one that you talked about. Understanding that this Black community of Quince Orchard existed, that just floored me. I couldn't believe that it had existed, that these acts of communal self-determination were done by people 3 years after emancipation. Then juxtapose that, Rufus, against what my grandmother did 100 years later. So in 1968, my grandmother told me the story of how that Black church had fallen on hard times. In April of 1968, the congregants of Pleasant View pulled themselves together to have a dinner and to figure out which direction they were going to go. And one of the things I capture in Too Precious to Lose is that sentiment. We talked about the importance of the Black church. And so there was real differences of opinion on what direction they should go, recognizing that they didn't have the financial stability to sustain themselves as an independent church. And so in the middle of this dinner where they're debating about their future, the knock comes at the door, and word is delivered that Dr. King has been assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. So this dinner is taking place on April 4th, 1968. Mm-hmm. And something about the connection between that community being founded in 1868 and then 100 years later, that dinner taking place where the descendants of that decision were trying to figure out exactly which direction they were going to take this church, ultimately deciding that they were going to merge that historically Black church with two white congregations, one of which was Northern, and one of which was Southern, themselves split over the issue of slavery back in 1844. Those two decisions, Rufus, made me think there's something more here. I want to explore this community's story. I want to explore my family's story and understand how we can use this story from the past to really talk about where we are today and how we move forward into the future.
Such a wonderful story, wonderful book. Two questions, I know we're out of time, but for listeners who might feel disconnected from their own family history, what is one simple step that they may be able to take today to start preserving stories that may otherwise be lost?
Well, I remind everyone, Rufus, that I am not a historian. I was forced in this role. There was a forcing event that I took advantage of. And so I encourage everyone to not wait for the forcing event. I can't tell you how many people I talk to that say, I was supposed to do that. I was supposed to sit down with my mother or my grandmother or my great aunt or great uncle, and they passed away before I had the chance, and they took the stories with them. And so I say, you do not need to write a book, but it is imperative that you sit down with your loved ones and capture their story. You will bless the world with those stories, but you will also bless yourself. I know that I am forever changed and I'm forever better for the experience that I got to sit with my grandmother and then with other stewards of our community and then collect those stories into Too Precious to Lose. And I can tell you, your listeners, that they will be bettered when they have the opportunity to sit with someone else and sort of cherish It's someone else's story.
There's so much more to talk about here, Jason. Are you coming into Chicago for the opening of the Obama Presidential Center?
I will. I can't wait. I'm so excited for what they're planning for June.
Well, when you do, please reach out and come in and let's sit down and talk about this some more, because it's a wonderful book and I'd love to meet you and talk more about it.
Rufus, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about it. Would love to see you and so excited to share the stories from Too Precious to Lose.
Thank you so much, Jason. Thanks for getting up early. Thanks for writing the book, and thanks for sharing these thoughts with us this morning. It's really important on so many different levels that we'll talk about when we connect again in June.
Can't wait. God bless you, brother. Thank you.
Well, you too. Let's find out from Annette what's going on in the news. When we come back, we have in the studio with us Dr. Macqueline King. She is the interim CEO of Chicago Public Schools. We'll chat with her. Back right after this.
Another heavy coat day with temperatures right now in the 30s. Good morning. I'm Annette Flournoy, and here's what's happening. The Chicago Transit Authority is fighting to restore funding for the Red Line Extension and Purple Line modernization projects. See, back in October, the White House announced it was pausing more than $2 billion in funding for Chicago's infrastructure projects, citing concerns about race-based contracting. The CTA sued, and now there is a court hearing later this morning. Well, a woman who says she was drugged and raped by comedian Bill Cosby has been awarded $19 million by a Southern California jury. Donna Motsinger filed a lawsuit in civil court claiming she met him in 1972 while waitressing at a restaurant. She says she went to a comedy show where she says he spiked her wine and raped her. Cosby's attorney says he doesn't remember the encounter, but that if it happened, it was consensual. The jury in Santa Monica deliberated for almost 3 days, coming back with a $19 million judgment. That's a look at our news now on 1690 WVON. Traffic and weather up next. WVON News Time, 7:33.
This Women's History Month, WVON proudly presents Women Who Roar, Black Women Leading in Corporate America, a special live roundtable discussion you don't want to miss. Tune in to Cleopatra Draper live on The Cleopatra Show, Wednesday, March 25th, 11 a.m. to 12 noon. Real stories, real leadership, real impact, only on WVON 1690.
Sharpton. Catch Reverend Al Sharpton online at WVON.com or on the WVON app. Just click the Al Sharpton banner. Tune in every day at 12 noon for your daily dose. And if you miss it, catch the overnight replay from midnight to 3 a.m. We're keeping it real with Al Sharpton on WVON 1690.
Reverend Al told you personally, keep it real. Keep it real. Keep it real.
This is Khomeini Khan, certified financial planner professional. For the past year, I've been on a mission to change lives and build wealth in our community. Together, we're changing the paradigm. This year, I'm back with a new series, Wealth Strategies, Money Talks. Join me every Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. on the Rufus Williams Show as we have thoughtful discussions around building wealth in our community. We'll discuss topics like investing, savings, tax strategies, retirement, and all things money. Yes, that's Tuesday at 8:30 a.m., so set those alarms. Also, be sure to check out the podcast at WVONWealthShow.com.
Khomeini Khan is a certified financial planner professional with Optimal Planning Partners in alliance with Equitable Advisors, LLC member SIPC in Oak Brook, Illinois. For more information, please call 630-575-5046.
This report is brought to you by Blindster.com. Kyle from Blindster.com started Blindster in his garage over 15 years ago to make custom blinds easy and affordable for everyone. You measure, you install, and you save big on custom blinds. Plus, they guarantee they'll fit. Blindster.com.
WVON traffic and weather now.
Our focus right now is in Dalton, where there's a report of a rollover accident at Lincoln Avenue in the Dalton area, right at Park Avenue. That area right now, we do see some emergency crews in that area, so you want to steer clear if at all possible. Looking at what's happening along the Bishop Ford, I-8094 to the Ryan, you'll move along at the posted speed. Light traffic still for now along Tuskegee Airmen Memorial. The Ryan, still that 17-minute trip from 95th Street into downtown. Turning to DuSable Lakeshore Drive, things are moving fairly well right now. The inbound side of the Stevenson is still that 30-minute trip in from I-355 to DuSable Drive outbound fine. The Eisenhower, a 50-minute trip from Thorndale to the Burns Circle, 40 on the outbound side. And the Kennedy, still just about a 40-minute trip from O'Hare to downtown. Getting to the airport, unusually heavy for this time of morning at 35 minutes. Taking another look at weather, we're seeing some cloudy conditions this morning. A heavy cold day again with temperatures in the 30s. The National Weather Service says we could see a high today in the upper 40s, low 50s. Right now it's 31 at O'Hare, 31 in South Holland, and 31 degrees here at the Talk of Chicago. That's a look at traffic and weather now. I'm NF Lenoy on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
If you're not out of the bed yet, then what are you waiting for? It's the WVON Morning Show with Rufus Williams on 1690 WVON.
Let me show you the way to go. Don't know everything, but there's something I do know. I know. I've read and heard it, and I'm ready to show that we can come together.
Welcome back. As mentioned before, I'm happy to have join me in the studio the interim CEO of Chicago Public Schools, Dr. Macqueline King. Dr. King, welcome back to WVON.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, it's good to have you. So let's begin here. Get into all these conversations, and people often throw out these platitudes about the challenges of our schools, which I take exception to, having been a former president of the board. So I kind of correct them as it is. But let's begin at the point. Tell us about the good news with the schools. How are our schools doing?
The schools are doing well. They're thriving despite, some of the challenges that people like to mention and uplift so often. You don't hear some of the really wonderful things that are happening. For example, we have this year 95 Posse scholars going to top tier universities. Marshall High School just won the state championship. We have a student at LaSalle too who is going off to Washington, D.C. for the National Spelling Bee. We have a very increasing graduation rate and even more students each year acquiring higher dual enrollment at city colleges and some of our universities. So there are lots of amazing things happening in Chicago Public Schools. It's often overshadowed by those stories that make the news and aren't as flattering.
You could just say people like mess. So when you find bad stuff, that's what people prefer to talk about. But there are perpetual good stories and perpetually good schools within our system that don't get the views that they absolutely should get. Love to ask you about enrollment, because with this whole thing around immigration and the push from this administration in Washington against that, how has that impacted our schools? How has that impacted enrollment? How are we doing with that issue still being live?
One of the things that we've done since I've been at what I organized was to bring all of our key stakeholders together to address the federal administration. So once a month or biweekly, we were meeting I brought together CTU, SEIU, the city, and Chicago Public Schools, and we had a separate roundtable for nonprofits, but we all came together to address the federal response to Chicago Public Schools. And we looked at the data to analyze how the federal activity was impacting our students in our schools. And what we did find was that on the days where there were actions like high activity, that there was a decline in enrollment. We also found that there are some students that would return, but then there were some students that did not return right away. And so there has been some impact, but not as disparate as what one might think. But what we found is that our students find Chicago Public Schools as a safe haven. It's someplace where they feel safe.
One of the interesting things that I recognized in my time there, when something would happen with children in a school, it affects the school. When something happens with the children in the classroom, it affects all the children in the classroom. At that time, we were dealing with a lot of shootings. We're dealing with a lot of murders and the impact that would have. I would imagine that having these kind of authorities outside, or the threat of them being any place, would impact the school community. Is that what you saw and generally within our system?
Well, we found for sure that it has an emotional impact on schools and the surrounding community, because parents have to take their children to school, they have to go to work. So what we found was schools were deemed as the safest place, and it was humbling. It was a humbling experience to realize how much the community and the city saw schools as a safe haven. What we found was that communities where they had a very strong community base and infrastructure, and lots of community-based organizations that were ready to step in and have boots on the ground to support the students, the families, and the schools, those communities fared a lot better with their response to the federal activity in collaboration with the schools. However, it's not the same across the city, and that's what we were addressing, is trying to stabilize all of the schools across the city and all of the communities to build up that same level of community city supports to provide the wraparound services that our families need, whether it's gun violence or federal activity. It shows the importance of community in schools.
How are you finding otherwise community and parent engagement in our schools? I know we just had our LSC elections last week, and I did talk to someone. Can't think of her name.
Danny Diego Alvarez?
No.
No?
But anyway, it'll come to me.
Kishasha Ford?
That's who I talked to. She was on someone else's show. She wasn't on my show. I just happened to call in while they were talking about it. But that has long been one way. When it was in its inception, LSCs were a way to get the community and parents involved in the running of our schools. How are you seeing that working? How did we see the turnout for elections? How do we see the turnout for candidates running for local school councils?
So I'm really passionate about the local school councils, and I pushed to ensure that we extended the local school council deadline for applicants. I do believe, I'm encouraged by what we can do with local school councils as we near the fully elected school boards. I believe that shoring up local school councils, our parent advisory councils known as PACs, and our bilingual advisory councils known as BACs, those are avenues that already exist within Chicago Public Schools that I want to strengthen so that parents have a clear pathway to elevate their voice and to support the greater CACs across the city, to make sure that as they move towards a fully elected school board, that there are multiple levels to engage district board leaders on parents' needs and community needs specifically.
I would tell you, I appreciate local school councils, and I appreciate the engagement of parents and students and community and administration and all that is. I did take exception to a couple of things, though, and I really took exception to the ability of local school councils to hire and fire principals. I just thought we were putting a lot on people who just may not be trained to do that. It's a lot to evaluate a professional. And because you run for this role doesn't necessarily make you available to have the ability to do that, because it's a pretty big deal in doing those things. And that is truly the center of the enterprise and learning. So, and I say that having been a local school council member and having been the president of a local school council. So I wasn't speaking out of turn. I was speaking about the things that I know, but I do recognize it wasn't just my opinion, because I did hold kind of a position, but I still wonder how we do with the evaluation and the maintenance of principals and the training of them, given the ability of local school councils to evaluate them.
It is a large job, much like the board president. These are parents, some work, some have children at home, and they take on the responsibility of committing themselves to improving the school that's anchored in their community. We do have a lot of work ahead of us. However, I do believe that we need to improve the training that's provided, make sure that there's a positive relationship between the principal and the local school council members. And I think sometimes the biggest challenge is time, the training, the time that people need to spend together, the education. We need to make sure that our local school council members are educated on all that is expected of a principal from the district and from the school as well, because although there is alignment and we're working on alignment, it does require understanding of the context of the school within a larger district. And sometimes our families are, more focused, or they fully understand the context of their school and their community and not the school in the context of the greater community.
Yeah, some ideas and concept work out better in concept than they do in actuality. And we'll see how this 21-member school board turns out as well. But we'll talk about that maybe a little later. We're talking with Dr. Macqueline King. She is the interim CEO of Chicago Public Schools. We'll have more with her right after this.
More of the morning show with Rufus Williams coming up on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
Tuned in to your favorite WVON personalities on Facebook Live? Don't just watch, like it, love it, share it. Every click helps us grow the conversation and keep the community strong. So remember, like it, love it, share it, Chicago.
Since 1985, Solo Beauty has been Chicago's home for beauty, culture, and confidence. From locks to curls, find all your favorite brands. Luster Pink, TGIN, Talia Waheed, plus local favorites like Tress Organics, Lock Bay, and Black Panther. When you shop Solo, you support Black jobs, Black business, and Black beauty. Visit us at 8158 South Cottage Grove or 9011 South Ashland, or shop online and on DoorDash. And don't forget to tune in Tuesdays at 9 p.m. for the Black Hair Care Business Talk Show on WVON. Shop Solo, shine together.
Financial freedom starts with access. Fifth Third Bank is breaking down barriers to banking with tools and programs that help you build credit, save, and grow. Our mission is simple: empower every Chicagoan to move forward, because economic mobility means opportunity. This is banking a Fifth Third better. Visit 53.com to learn more. That's 53.com. Fifth Third Bank, National Association, member FDIC.
It's Rufus Williams.
Honored to have in the studio with me this morning, Congressman Danny Davis.
Thank you for your analysis. I heard you as I was coming in and your assessment. I listened to you even when I'm in Washington.
Weekdays at 7 a.m. on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
The Friday Night of Premieres returns to Vaughn TV Friday, March 27th. Opening night, Vaughn TV takes you inside a story that shook the nation. Say Her Name. The life and death of Sandra Bland. She was 28 years young, outspoken, politically engaged. 3 days after a routine traffic stop, she was found dead in a Texas jail cell.
How do you go from failure to signal a lane change to dead in jail by alleged suicide?
Say Her Name, a gripping look at the 2-year fight between her family and Texas authorities, revealing new details, hard truths, and Sandra's own powerful words. Then stay with us all month for bold storytelling from fearless new voices. Friday Night of Premieres begins March 27th, only on Vaughn TV. Watch on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV Plus, the WVON app, or at VON.TV. Vaughn TV, for the culture, by the culture.
This report is brought to you by AutoZone. Get in the zone. It's time to say goodnight to that check engine light with the free AutoZone Fix Finder service. It'll help troubleshoot the likely cause of your light for free, so you can drive with peace of mind. Restrictions apply. Get in the zone. AutoZone.
WVON traffic and weather now.
Travel times are ramping up. Right now, we're at a 20-minute trip along the Ryan and from 95th Street into downtown. The Bishop 4, so far so good. That trip from I-80-94 to the Ryan, still pretty close to the posted speed. Tuskegee Airmen Memorial, we are seeing some brake lights approaching 103rd Street, then slow all the way in. DuSable Lakeshore Drive, things are still pretty quiet for now. The inbound side of the Stevenson, a 45-minute trip now from I-355 to DuSable Drive, outbound still fine. Things are ramping up along the Eisenhower. You're now looking at a 51-minute trip from Thorndale to the Burns Circle, heavier on the outbound side, now 47 minutes. And the Kennedy O'Hare from downtown, still that 40-minute trip. Give yourself some extra time getting to the airport, now bumped up to 38 minutes. A few clouds for starters. The National Weather Service says we're headed to temperatures in the low 50s. It's 31 at Midway, 31 in Chatham, and 31 degrees here at the Talk of Chicago. That's a look at traffic and weather now. I'm Annette Flournoy on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
Keep your eyes on the road and both hands on the steering wheel. We will not be held responsible for any accidents. It's the WVON Morning Show with Rufus Williams on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
Welcome back. We're still talking with Dr. Macqueline King, Interim CEO of CPS. Let's begin there. Because when I spoke with you before, you had just come into position and interim was interim. But we don't know what that means anymore because you've now been there. You were there since July of last year.
June 18th of 2025 was my first day.
Excuse me, June 18th of 2025. So now they've been in this search for a new CEO. They are back and forth. Once you're not in, now you're in, and folks are dropping off. And without getting into any of that, I think what's helpful is for people to get to know you a little better. So tell us about Dr. Macqueline King.
Well, I am a daughter of Chicago. I was raised on the south side of Chicago. I attended all Chicago public schools. Interestingly enough, all of my elementary schools are closed. I share that often because it gives insight into how I lead and address some of the trauma that is experienced within community. I graduated and went to a high school that is now closed. And it was actually a school that I think would have fared better in this present day. It was built around experiences. So we took core classes. However, some of our some of our additional classes were like sailing, radio stations. We were working banks. So it was very
near North. What school did you go to?
It was Metro High School.
Metro, yes.
Yeah. Do you remember Metro?
I do remember.
Oh, you're aging yourself. Dating yourself.
Look, it is what it is.
It is, but it was a wonderful school that allowed us to explore interest, and we had experiences. And so I graduated from Metro and attended UIC before transitioning from a pre-pharmacy major to an education major. And I raised my children in Chicago public schools, experiencing the whole dance of selective enrollment schools. One of my children went 5400 North to attend school at Von Steuben. The other went 5300 South to attend Kenwood. So I understand the parent perspective and the dynamics of if your child does not attend your neighborhood school. From there, I was a teacher on the west side at Henry Horner. I transitioned to work with the Academy for Urban School Leadership on the north side. And so I've had a varied experience as far as teaching and learning and seeing the city from a kind of broad perspective, so to speak. I became a principal through New Leaders for New Schools. And I led a school in Woodlawn, Dumas, which was impacted by school closures in 2013. From there, I transitioned to attend a school, to work and lead a school on the north side in Uptown, which was a very different experience from that within Woodlawn. And after leading Courtney, it was the pandemic that really led me to seek other opportunities outside of the principalship. I was able to see into some of the homes, we had, just what our students are actually dealing with. Coming into the building was one thing and building relationships, but understanding what was happening with our students in real time in their homes, and then watching our teachers kind of take that heavy load and try to continue to teach and then lead their lives during the pandemic as well. And I sought to have a more broader policy impact to see how I could impact policy to improve the outcomes of the students within Chicago. And I took a role under Mayor Lightfoot as the Senior Director of Education Policy. And from there, I transitioned in under Brandon Johnson when the transition was made. And that's how I came to be. And once there was an opening, I thought, I do too have a lot of opinions about what could work. And I had a lot of lived experiences. And I developed a lot of relationships over my 32 years as an educator in Chicago. And I thought, if not me, then who?
And so in thinking about that now, and since you posed that question, I suspect that this interim position you have, you would prefer to be a permanent position.
What I found initially, I started as interim, and that was the role to allow to stabilize the district until a permanent CEO and superintendent was found. What I realized was that a lot of the policies and the initiatives that needed to take place immediately in order to stabilize the district was one that I would not be able to complete within a short period of time. And it would not have been fair to the students and the families and the staff of the district to pass it along to someone, and that wasn't their vision. And so I made the decision to seek the permanent role so that I could have a more long-term lasting effect, because I do understand the historical context of Chicago Public Schools as it plays out in what's happening in Chicago today with the federal activity, the budget crisis, and understanding how people perceive what's happening at the district and perceive a need for equity and perceive a need for a response to the historical harms and that many of our schools have experienced, and many that I've lived. Closed schools as a student, closed schools as a school leader. So those things I understand, and the harm, and I believe that I am positioned to use my lived experience plus my professional experience to kind of guide the next phase of development and growth for Chicago Public Schools.
So are there decisions that you think you would have made differently if you were in a permanent position versus those that you had to make as an interim, or when does that shift in your mind?
That's a great question. It didn't for me, and that's where I found that was the challenge. I took an interim role, but I was completely committed to the work as if I were the permanent CEO. And that's where I realized, well, Macqueline, this is something that the permanent CEO should pursue, in leadership. And so that's where the conflict, the title was interim, but my heart was committed to the district.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it any other way. We're talking with Dr. Macqueline King. She is the interim CEO of Chicago Public Schools currently. We'll have more with her. Let's find out what's going on in Black Information News and the headlines. We'll be back right after this.
Cloudy and brisk once again on this Tuesday, March 24th, 2026. I'm Annette Flournoy, and in the headlines, topping our news this hour, Interim Chicago Public Schools CEO Dr. Macqueline King talks exclusively with WVON's Rufus Williams this morning about some of her biggest challenges and successes. The murder of a Loyola student now leads to new friction points over state sanctuary policies, and Donald Trump is weighing in. And a jury awarded Bill Cosby, awarded a California woman $19 million for a rape claim from back in 1972. National news from the Black Information Network is next on Chicago's original social media platform, WVON 1690 AM, Berwyn, Chicago. It's 8 o'clock.
BIN News Now. An Air Canada Express jet hit a Port Authority rescue truck while landing at LaGuardia Airport, killing the pilot and co-pilot. An air traffic controller appeared to admit he messed up in the heat of the moment.
That wasn't good to watch.
Yeah, I know I was here. I tried to reach out to my stuff, and we were dealing with an emergency earlier. I messed up.
No, man, you did the best you could.
41 people were sent to the hospital. The airport reopened Monday about 2 p.m. Eastern following the fatal collision. Former President Obama is praising the late Robert Mueller as one of the FBI's finest leaders after President Trump reacted to Mueller's death by saying he was glad he was dead. Mueller, who led the Russia investigation, died Friday at 86. And Netflix and Warner Music Group have signed an exclusive multi-year first-look deal for documentaries on WMG artists, which CEO Robert Kinsel calls a major chance to reach new fans. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app. Here's Terry McCready.
ICE agents are now at the nation's airports. The Trump administration says they're helping TSA agents who have been working without paychecks during the partial government shutdown.
These guys
They got families like anybody else. They're Americans like anybody else. It's terrible what's happened to them.
Black Republican Congressman and candidate for Governor Byron Donalds of Florida blames the Democrats for playing politics. Party leadership doesn't want to fund the Department of Homeland Security until major changes are made to the immigration enforcement tactics of ICE agents. Donalds met with the Florida Atlantic University College Republicans yesterday for an invitation-only event at the school in Boca Raton. President Trump in Memphis yesterday talking up crime reduction in the U.S.
Here in Memphis, we've achieved one of the largest, fastest declines in violent crime ever recorded. So that's something, right? Ever recorded.
Trump participated in a roundtable to discuss the success of the Memphis Safe Task Force. The initiative launched last year and is aimed at reducing violent crime through coordination among local, state, and federal agencies. Trump said because of the operation, Memphis can no longer be called the murder capital of the U.S. FBI Director Kash Patel, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth were also in attendance. The Chicago Transit Authority is suing the Trump administration in a move to reverse a White House decision to freeze $3.1 billion in funding for rail projects in the third most populous U.S. city. The CTA is calling the suspension an unlawful act of political retaliation. According to the lawsuit, the U.S. Transportation Department and its Federal Transit Administration already have withheld at least $9.5 million from the city's public transit agency since October. The transit agency called the frozen grants crucial to modernize and expand the Chicago system of elevated and underground trains. Organizers predicting millions of Americans will join this weekend's No Kings protests against President Trump. It's set for Saturday in the third such national protest. According to the event website, demonstrations are planned in more than 3,000 locations across the U.S., including New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Austin, and Washington, D.C. This protest comes after the two fatal ICE-involved shootings in Minnesota. The Supreme Court finishing hearing oral arguments in a case about whether states may count mail-in ballots received after Election Day. All 50 states require mail-in ballots to be postmarked by Election Day, but 14 states have grace periods where ballots that are submitted by Election Day can be counted if they arrive late. The case comes out of Mississippi, and court experts say the conservative justices seemed skeptical of the state's argument to allow it. The Supreme Court is expected to decide on the case by the end of June. Stay informed, stay connected, and subscribe. Follow VIN News this hour wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Terry McCready for the Black Information Network.
This report is brought to you by Blindster.com. Kyle from Blindster.com started Blindster in his garage over 15 years ago to make custom blinds easy and affordable for everyone. You measure, you install, and you save big on custom blinds. Plus, they guarantee they'll fit. Blindster.com.
What if you could have the most reliable Wi-Fi? And get this, what if you could keep it at the same price for 5 years? That's the Xfinity 5-year price guarantee. Just 5 years of fiber-powered Wi-Fi that boosts speeds to the devices that need them most. That finds and fixes problems before you even notice them. Like super intelligent Wi-Fi with a sixth sense. And that keeps you gaming in the fast lane, even when the whole family's banking on bandwidth. And here's the best part. No annual contracts, no hidden fees, and our best equipment included. Plus, get online in minutes with same-day Wi-Fi. Hey, let's face it, a lot can change in 5 years. Kids grow taller, dreams grow bigger, but your Wi-Fi, it would stay reliable and the price would stay put. The Xfinity 5-year price guarantee. Lock in your price and unlock the possibilities. Xfinity, imagine that. Select plans only. Restrictions apply. Powered by fiber. Connected to the premises by coaxial cable. Actual speeds vary.
Tuned in to your favorite WVON personalities on Facebook Live? Don't just watch, like it, love it, share it. Every click helps us grow the conversation and keep the community strong. So remember, like it, love it, share it, Chicago.
Hey Alexa, play WVON 1690 AM.
Getting WVON 1690 AM station from iHeartRadio.
Try it out for yourself. America is listening to WVON.
This report is brought to you by Allstate. Wish you could save on home insurance? With Allstate, you could easily save and get quality protection. Yep, it's a win-win. So what are you waiting for? Check Allstate first for a quote today. You're in good hands with Allstate.
WVON traffic and weather now.
Right on cue, your travel times are ramping up along DuSable Lakeshore Drive. That northbound trip from 67th Street to Jackson, now just about 17 minutes. We're looking at several brake lights right around Hayes. On the north end of DuSable Lakeshore Drive, Hollywood to Monroe, just about a 17-minute trip as well. Pretty heavy right around Bryn Mawr to Hollywood. Turning to the Ryan, give yourself 22 minutes from 95th Street into downtown. Getting to the Ryan along the Bishop Ford, just about 17 minutes in from I-8094. Tuskegee Airmen Memorial still moving along just fine. You'll see a few brake lights right around 103rd Street. Turning to the Stevenson, just bumped up to 45 minutes from I-355 to DuSable Drive, outbound a 30-minute trip. 55 now along the Eisenhower from Thorndale to the Burns Circle, just about a 50-minute on the outbound side. The Kennedy bumped up to 50 minutes from O'Hare to downtown, still just about a 38-minute trip to the airport. Cloudy and brisk today, another heavy coat day in Chicago as temperatures make their way through the 30s into the upper 40s, low 50s. Tonight, dipping down to 29. It's 31 at O'Hare, 31 in Chatham, and 31 degrees here at the Talk of Chicago. That's a look at traffic and weather now. I'm NF Lenoy on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
Happy Women's History Month from the station that celebrates Black girl magic, WVON.
Live from the Xfinity Studios, it's the station that America listens to, WVON, Berwyn, Chicago. It's Rufus Williams on Chicago's essential storyteller, WVON.
You wonder how we do it. It's just one simple rule. I'm just cool. Honey, baby, can't you see? Girl, I'm so cool. Ain't nobody bad like me. Hey. R-U-F-U-S. What's that spell? R-U-F-U-S. I'm just cool. Honey, baby, can't you see? Girl, I'm so cool. Ain't nobody bad like me. Sing it, baby. R-U-F-U-S. What's that stand? R-U-F-U-S. That spell cool. The audio genius. The audio genius. The audio genius.
Welcome back. In conversation here this morning with Dr. Macqueline King. She is the interim CEO of Chicago Public Schools. Dr. King, during the break, you talked about this budgeting process. I know that became an issue last year with some parts that people thought would inure to the schools, but as you went through the process, they actually didn't. You're in that process now, which is why I only have you for an hour this morning. Mm-hmm. But talk about how you managed through that last year and what your plans are this year.
Last year, I hit the ground running in community. We set up several community kind of like town halls where we went and community signed up. We presented the budget as it was, with the goal of protecting classrooms, and we wanted to hear from people within community what their priorities were, what were their non-negotiables, and we took that back into the room where we were planning, and we used that to inform the allocations for the next school year. And once the budget was balanced, we did present to the public, this is what we heard in community, and this is the budget, and this is where your voice has been heard. We also conducted like learning sessions, because to your point earlier about local school councils, and there's a process of understanding what is actually happening, what do we have available to us, understanding the budget, like basic budget 101. And so we had learning sessions as well. So there were learning sessions, there were the community town halls around budget. Then there was the planning process. And then there was the sharing of the budget, highlighting where community had informed the budget. And we were able to protect classrooms. This year, we're going to lead with a series of community town halls as well, going back into community to hear from parents, students, staff, businesses, community-based organizations, because all of these stakeholders make up the ecosystem within a school. So we'll have a series of roundtables. We'll also have more educational seminars to bring families up to speed about what's actually happening. Should be budget 102 for most of the families if they participated last year, but we will happily have a budget 101 as well. This is a great opportunity for parents to begin to set aside time to understand, have a deeper understanding of what's happening in Chicago Public Schools, to elevate their voice, and to make sure that their voice is being heard and their needs are being represented. This is the opportunity for parents to speak up and share what the needs are across the 77 neighborhoods. That is one of the benefits of having local school councils, the PACs and the BACs, to support the CACs, so that there are multiple opportunities for parents to express the needs of students and community as a whole to the district. We are responsible for allocating resources based on need.
So your budget is around $10 billion with 321,000 students or so. Is there more need within our schools?
There's definitely a need when you layer on just the basic needs that a school district, a very large school district would have. Then you layer on the federal activity, the increase in need for social emotional learning, the increase in need cost. We just think about the average cost of inflation of what it costs to just operate a school district, and then to respond to the growing needs of our students that receive second language learning, ESL services, students that receive special education services, our students that are in temporary living situations. Those things all fluctuate. And so the cost of the district is never stagnant, and it's always dependent upon what's happening around the schools and in community.
When people start talking about the challenges of our schools and children who can't read or children who can't write or children who aren't learning, how do we respond to that? Because those are thrown out in broad generalities. And we began this conversation with how our schools are doing and our children are doing. How do you respond to that?
That's something that I hear quite a bit. And my response is that our students are learning to read. Our data in early childhood shows that students are entering in kindergarten, K1 and 2, and the academic growth on the standardized assessment, the iReady for early childhood, our students are entering strong. They're entering strong, and it's our responsibility as educators and family members to ensure that we hold on to those gains that our students are making in K1 and 2.
Speaking of holding on, there's been much conversation about neighborhood schools and much conversation about selective enrollment schools. In many cases, the selective enrollment schools are the higher performing schools because of obvious reasons. They're selective. What do we do in the face of whatever pressures you have on your budget to ensure that we hold on to whatever gains we have and still bring up those that are most challenged?
I think there is a misconception that only selective enrollment schools are high performing. We have some very high performing neighborhood schools. And in order to ensure that all students are having access to a high quality education is one of the reasons why parents joining local school council PACs and BACs are important, because each school, within a community, they have unique needs. And so the district, to better understand those needs, we rely on those local school councils, the staff members, the parents, and now students. There is a growing call for students to have their voice elevated and recognized and considered when we're making decisions. So I want to uplift that because I do believe in this day and age, as the schools system and the educational system is changing, students are changing. I think we kind of talked about that. They're very experiential. And I think to lean into what the way a student learns, we do have to hear from them. I think the local school council needs to understand what their students within community needs in order to learn best. And I think that needs to be elevated to the district level. And then it is our responsibility to provide resources based on the needs of that unique school and that community. That's what I believe is missing. It does require that we have meaningful engagement with our communities in order to do so. I want to strengthen those systems to ensure that there is a system to elevate student voice, a system to elevate parent voice, a system to elevate community voice, and that information reaches to the district, and we are responsible for ensuring that we allocate the needs, the resources that the students need. It's part of our reciprocal accountability. And I do believe that that's the piece that's missing. So our students have been learning. But we are seeing that, this year the data is kind of stabled off. So what do? We have to switch it up, and we have to make sure that our resources are having a strategic impact on the schools. And the only way we can do that at the highest level is that all stakeholders are engaged and take a sense of responsibility for the learning that takes place in the school.
So much conversation takes place, and I get lost between what we talk about in the commercial break and what we talk about on air. But one thing I do have to ask you about, and I know we need to take a break, but we've got a number of schools thinking about resources and the best allocation of them. We have a number of schools that are woefully under-enrolled. Mm-hmm. And I've talked about them, not with you, but I've talked about them. And I'm curious as to what you think about what we do about that issue. And I point out a couple of them often being Douglas is one, Hirsch is another, and some others that are out there that it just seems that the experience that one gets in a school that is that under enrolled has to be different than what you would get in a full high school experience. And it can't be the best use of resources given what's required to be in those schools. Love to get your thoughts on that. Love to get your thoughts on charter schools. I know we did something with the Spira. Look, we only have an hour, which seems like a lot of time, but it's not enough. But there are a lot more questions. So let's take a quick break, and we'll wrap up our conversation with Dr. King right after this.
More of the morning show with Rufus Williams coming up on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
This Women's History Month, we're amplifying the brilliance, the boldness, and the unapologetic power of women who refuse to whisper. These are the women who roar, the lawmakers, the CEOs who walk into boardrooms and flip the script, the journalists who ask the hard questions, the organizers who move communities from outrage to action. These women are breaking barriers, rewriting narratives, and redefining what leadership looks like, fueled by courage and driven by legacy. Listen to Women Who Roar, an exclusive feature on WVON, because quiet was never the assignment.
It all comes down to this, folks. Yep, the entire season is on the line.
But my throat has officially thrown in the towel.
Sounds like you need Vicks VapoCool drops. They're max strength and vaporize sore throat pain.
Whoa! These VapoCool drops hit fast.
Speaking of fast, did you just see that play?
Yeah, he vaporized that ball.
That fun should have come with a penalty.
Vaporize sore throat pain with Vicks VapoCool drops. Use as directed.
It's tax season, and by now, I know you're a bit tired of the numbers, but here's an important one you need to hear. $16 billion. That's how much money in refunds the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud. Not all grim news. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second for your personal information and alerts you to threats that you could easily miss on your own. If your identity is stolen, LifeLock's U.S.-based restoration specialist is going to fix it. Save up to 40% off your first year with the promo code BECK, 1-800-LifeLock or lifelock.com. Terms to apply.
Hey, it's Cleopatra Draper. Join me for the Midday Show weekdays at 9 a.m. where we'll sip and spill all the tea. Do you want it hot or cold? Either way, we're serving up the flavor of the day. Weekdays at 9 a.m. right here on the station giving you what's now and what's next. 1690 WVON.
This report is brought to you by Blindster.com. Kyle from Blindster.com started Blindster in his garage over 15 years ago to make custom blinds easy and affordable for everyone. You measure, you install, and you save big on custom blinds. Plus, they guarantee they'll fit. Blindster.com.
WVON traffic and weather now.
New this hour, as you make your way along the outbound side of the Eisenhower, you do want to look out for a crash. It's at Costner. It's causing some delays there. We're looking at your outbound travel time, 50 minutes. The inbound side of the Eisenhower, still 55 from Thorndale to the Burn Circle. Turning to the Stevenson, still 45 from I-355 to DuSable Drive outbound, still fine. The Kennedy, 55 in from O'Hare to downtown. You're still looking at just about a 40-minute trip to the airport. Turning to the Ryan, 20 minutes from 95th Street to downtown. Getting to the Ryan along the Bishop Fort and Tuskegee Airmen Memorial, not too bad. And DuSable Lakeshore Drive, 67th Street to Jackson, a 17-minute trip. Stop and go right around Hayes, then again around Soldier Field. As you make your way on the north end of DuSable Drive, that trip from Hollywood to Monroe, now 18 minutes. Cloudy and cold, temperatures in the 30s. The National Weather Service says we're headed to a daytime high in the upper 40s, low 50s. Right now, though, it's 31 degrees at Midway, 31 in Chatham, and 31 here at the Talk of Chicago. That's a look at traffic and weather now. I'm Annette Flournoy on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
If you're not out of the bed yet, then what are you waiting for? It's the WVON Morning Show with Rufus Williams on 1690 WVON.
Welcome back. So, Dr. King, I did pose the question. What about these under-enrolled schools? What are your thoughts?
You know, my priority is the student experience, and I hope to use that as the anchor and the centering when we enter any discussion. My student experience, centering all that we do around the students. Those schools that are most under-enrolled are situated in the context of some of the historical harm that we talked about. And in order to best enhance the student experience for those students that attend those schools, we have to turn to community, because we need to not only enhance the student experience, but we have to work with community to want to have their children attend the school on whatever the outcome would be, whatever the community would decide. This is what's best for our community. This is what's best for our children within community. We would have to have parents trust that this is the student experience that I want for my child. So that is that's a very serious conversation that requires, or is a very complex conversation as well. However, whatever happens with the student experience in those communities, it is going to have to be a grassroots effort to ensure that it's something that could sustain, that school, that community. It will have to be able to sustain way past my leadership, any of the educators' tenure at that school. It does require a grassroots effort.
Yeah, I'll simply say, given the decline in enrollment throughout the district, it's going to be difficult for those schools to enroll enough students. And not being part of those specific communities, this has been one of the questions that's been there for a while, whether it's about achievement or whether it's about enrollment. There's just going to be some that aren't going to be able to stay open. I know there's been a moratorium on closing schools, which I thought was a bad idea as well. Just tends to move resources in ways in which resources are not best marshaled. That's the Rufus's opinion. Talk about charter schools, if you would. There's been the Spirit schools closed almost pretty recently, and right now, closed. There's also been some other discussion about charter schools. Share your thoughts on charter schools and what we should do using those models or contract schools or some of the other options other than traditional public schools?
So I believe charters are part of the Chicago Public Schools landscape. And all of the children, they are our children. As a school leader, we often would receive children from charters, or some of our students would enroll in charter. So there is this relationship that we have. That what we're experiencing now is that there's been a series of closings of charters. You mentioned Aspira. And so for us with Aspira, we have been successful in transitioning the Aspira students, about 75%, into various Chicago public schools. And so what I believe when we talk about educating the public around why charters, what public law or charter law says how we can engage with charters, and how the Chicago Public School codes, those are two different codes, charter code, school code. And so we always engaged in order to honor the contract and the charter code when we're working with the charter schools. However, in an instance like Aspira, we were not provided the collaboration that we needed. So the district did support those families that wanted to transition prior to Aspira self-closing on April 3rd. So it's a matter of how much collaboration would a charter want with Chicago Public Schools, but we do not see them as something different, external or outside. One of the challenges that I have is that as a district leader, we all support all children. And it is our responsibility, regardless of whether a parent chooses charter, public, or private, for us to ensure that students have what they need to grow into a productive member of society. That is our responsibility. And so I do believe that there are some people that feel like Chicago Public Schools has not been supportive. I believe that we have. I believe what I can do differently is to make very clear how charters and Chicago Public Schools partner in the future, and make sure that there's a clear understanding of how do we respect charters as they exist as unique entities within Chicago Public Schools.
You know, as I know, charter schools were initially designed as laboratories for great ideas, and then those ideas should move into the greater system. The good ones should move into the greater system. We've never had a real way of moving those great ideas into the greater system, so they tend to operate independently. I want to ask you this final question. No matter how long or short your tenure is at the helm of Chicago Public Schools, what is it that you want people to say about your tenure when you're done?
I would like for people to say that Superintendent King united the 77 neighborhoods across the city around educating students, that she prioritized the students within the Chicago public school systems and elevated the value of investing in our students.
Dr. Macqueline King, Interim CEO, Chicago Public Schools, thank you so much for coming in this morning. This has been we're getting to know you better because you're not there just for a couple of weeks, you're there for much longer. And I know there's been a lot of conversation about this whole interim role, how long it should last, whatever it is. But I think the perspective that you take, that whatever interim is, you're making long-term decisions in the best benefit of children. For me, that's a winner. And thank you so much for the work that you do and for coming in this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you. Let's find out what's going on in the news from Annette. When we come back, it's time for Wealth Strategies with Khomeini Khan.
Cloudy, brisk, and 34 degrees. Good morning. I'm Annette Flournoy, and here's what's happening. Topping our news this hour, now on the job for close to 9 months, interim Chicago Public Schools CEO Dr. Macqueline King talks exclusively with WVON's Rufus Williams this morning about becoming one of the 3 finalists to replace Pedro Martinez as the next superintendent.
I took an interim role, but I was completely committed to the work as if I were the permanent CEO. And that's where I realized, well, Macqueline, this is something that the permanent CEO should pursue, and leadership. And so that's where the conflict, the title was interim, but my heart was committed to the district.
She took on the job last June and was handed a $736 million CPS budget shortfall. Martinez was fired by the board following ongoing disputes between him and Mayor Brandon Johnson about how to provide more funding for CPS. Well, more details are released about a Chicago man accused of setting a Northside fire that led to the death of a Chicago firefighter, Michael Altman. Perry Williams has more.
A Cook County judge ordered Chief Slate detained yesterday after determining the defendant was a threat to the community and had a history of setting fires. Alderman James Gardner reacted.
The evidence was overwhelming, and I think they got it right, which is it's good to see. It's good for the family.
Slate reportedly dyed his hair and changed his clothes after the blaze. Firefighter Michael Altman died in last Monday's fire, and his funeral is set for later this week. I'm Perry Williams.
And the Chicago Transit Authority is fighting to restore funding for the Red Line extension and Purple Line modernization projects. Well, back in October, the White House announced it was pausing more than $2 billion in funding for Chicago infrastructure projects, citing concerns about race-based contracting. The CTA sued, and now there is a court hearing later this morning. Well, that's a look at our news now on 1690 WVON. Traffic and weather up next. WVON News Time, 8:32.
Before hot winds. Ooh, let's heat things up. Get fired up with Hot Winds, a new game from the Illinois Lottery. Learn how to play at IllinoisLottery.com. Be smart, play smart. Must be 18 or older to play. Game odds available at IllinoisLottery.com.
Hey Alexa, play WVON 1690 AM.
Getting WVON 1690 AM station from iHeartRadio.
Try it out for yourself. America is listening to WVON.
The Friday Night of Premieres returns to Vaughn TV Friday, March 27th. Opening night, Vaughn TV takes you inside a story that shook the nation. Say her name. The life and death of Sandra Bland. She was 28 years young, outspoken, politically engaged. 3 days after a routine traffic stop, she was found dead in a Texas jail cell.
How do you go from failure to signal a lane change to dead in jail by alleged suicide?
Say Her Name, a gripping look at the 2-year fight between her family and Texas authorities, revealing new details, hard truths, and Sandra's own powerful words. Then stay with us all month for bold storytelling from fearless new voices. Friday Night of Premieres begins March 27th, only on Vaughn TV. Watch on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV Plus, the WVON app, or at VON.TV. Vaughn TV, for the culture, by the culture.
Tune in every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. for Speak On It with Dr. Kofi Malik. You've seen him on cable TV. Now hear his spirited conversation on the Talk of Chicago. The question at hand is raising voices of the Negro. That plain and simple. Tune in every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. for Speak On It with Dr. Kofi Malik on the Talk of Chicago. 1690 WVON.
This report is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know you could save money on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Those people are probably saving a carload of cash right now. So what are you waiting for? Check Allstate first for a quote today. You're in good hands with Allstate.
It's D.L. Hughley.
The reason that the armed forces under Pete Hegseth didn't want people to go to the Ivy League schools, what do you got to be educated for to catch a bullet? This country will make you mandatory for you to sign up for war, but they will not do the same thing to make you vote.
Weekdays at 5 a.m. on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
It's tax season, and by now, I know you're a bit tired of the numbers, but here's an important one you need to hear. $16 billion. That's how much money in refunds the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud. Not all grim news. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second for your personal information and alerts you to threats that you could easily miss on your own. If your identity is stolen, LifeLock's U.S.-based restoration specialist is going to fix it. Save up to 40% off your first year with the promo code BECK, 1-800-LifeLock or lifelock.com. Terms to apply.
It all comes down to this, folks.
Yep, the entire season is on the line. But my throat has officially thrown in the towel.
Sounds like you need Vicks VapoCool drops. They're max strength and vaporize sore throat pain.
Whoa! These VapoCool drops hit fast.
Speaking of fast, did you just see that play?
Yeah, he
vaporize that ball. That fun should have come with a penalty.
Vaporize sore throat pain with Vicks VapoCool drops. Use as directed.
It's Matt McGill.
Man, I'm agitated by black people not understanding the moment that we're living in right now, as if we live in a post-racial America. And we're going to sit up here in a city like Chicago with the history of racism and bigotry and segregation. And we got nerve to complain about a black man in some damn snow. In 1995, we had a heat wave. 739 people died in the city of Chicago. And guess what you Negroes did? Y'all reelected Mayor Daley 3 more times after that. Help me help you, or get out the freaking way.
Weekdays at noon on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
This report is brought to you by Allstate. Wish you could save on home insurance? With Allstate, you could easily save and get quality protection. Yep, it's a win-win. So what are you waiting for? Check Allstate first for a quote today. You're in good hands with Allstate.
WVON traffic and weather now.
We're seeing a report of a train delay, South Shore Line westbound to Millennium Station. Expect up to a 45-minute delay due to equipment inspection. Taking a look at your travel times on the roadways, not too bad this morning. You're looking at a 17-minute trip along the Ryan in from 95th Street into downtown. The Bishop Ford, Tuskegee Airmen Memorial, things are pretty quiet there. USABO Lakeshore Drive, a 16-minute trip from 67th Street to Jackson on the north end of the drive. Now we're looking at just about 17 minutes from Hollywood to Monroe. The Stevenson, not too bad, a 45-minute trip in from I-355 to DuSable Drive outbound close to the posted speed. The inbound side of the Eisenhower still holding on to that 55-minute trip from Thorndale to the Burns Circle, 50 traveling out. And the Kennedy, a 50-minute trip in from O'Hare to downtown. Getting to the airport, give yourself just about 40 minutes there. Cloudy skies, a little brisk. Temperatures right now in the 30s. The National Weather Service says we should top out somewhere in the low 50s. Tonight, dropping down to 29. Currently is 34 at Midway, 34 in Woodlawn, and 34 degrees here at the Talk of Chicago. That's a look at traffic and weather now. I'm Annette Flournoy on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
The following is paid programming. The views are not necessarily those of this station. It's time for the Wealth Strategy Show with Khomeini Khan, powered by Optimal Planning Partners.
Khomeini Khan, Certified Financial Planner Professional, offers securities through Equitable Advisors, LLC, New York, New York, 212-314-4600. Member FINRA, SIPC, Equitable Financial Advisors in Michigan and Tennessee. Annuity and insurance products offered through Equitable Network, LLC, and does not provide tax or legal advice. Individuals may transact business and or respond to inquiries only in states in which they are properly registered and or licensed. This informational and educational radio segment does not offer or constitute and should not be relied upon as financial business or tax advice.
Never let your faith go. I've been there before, so confused, don't know which way to go. Stressed out, world so crazy, might as well stay in the house. Fear trying to rise up, got terrorists disguised. They look like us, but we know who we trust. Just when I say that we gon' be alright, we gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. Alright. Say we gon' be alright.
Welcome back. Boy, I tell you, education, safety, health, and money, that pretty much covers everything that we need. As always, look forward to this segment on Tuesdays at 8:30. It is the Wealth Strategies Show with none other than Khomeini Khan. Khomeini, good morning. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Rufus. How you doing today? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Different seeing you this way versus seeing you sitting right across the table from me, but looks like your setup is pretty good. I think this is going to work out all right.
Yeah, a little streaming today this morning, so appreciate the flexibility. Sometimes life happens and you got to roll with it, right?
Well, it's going to be easy for you for the next couple of weeks because this is how we're going to do it since I'll be traveling the next two. So we'll start this way in practice and make sure that works going forward. But the segment continues to be important, Khomeini. Talk again about why you think it's important that we have a segment like this.
Yeah, and thank you, Rufus. First, obviously, I want to welcome the listeners again. Your Tuesday check-in with your money wealth strategies. I appreciate everybody listening in. Rufus, I appreciate the question because each and every week, we're going to talk about why it's important that we have this segment and continue to have a segment like this because we're going to have continuous discussions around building wealth for ourselves, for our families, and particularly in the African American community. We do know that there is a wealth gap that exists between African American community and other communities, and so we need to have discussions around how we close that wealth gap. How do we continue to build wealth for our families for the future? And so we're going to talk about different topics every single week. We've been having some good topics, some deep discussions. Everything from building wealth through home ownership. Investing in the stock market, starting businesses. So each and every week, we're going to do a deep dive to educate the listeners and be able to share some of the experience that I have over 25 years of helping families build wealth. And so with that being said, our financial tip of the day is preparing for retirement. Let's get into discussion about retirement. That's one of the hottest topics that I talk to with most people about. People are concerned around am I doing enough for retirement? Can I prepare for retirement? Not prepare for retirement? Am I saving enough? Am I spending too much? A lot of this really, is about retirement and making sure people are comfortable in what they're doing. And so we're going to dive into that today. So I'm excited about that, Rufus.
It's wonderful. And the smart people who actually have an opportunity to have the resources to do so begin preparing for retirement on the first day they start working. It always sounds good. But when everything gets in the way as life starts lifing, then it's a lot harder to do so. So talk to us, if you would, from the very beginning about the difference between preparing for retirement versus just retiring.
Yeah, and that's an important point. And I like to tell people to understand the difference between, preparing and actually doing, because I've had clients do both. And so the difference is that, when we prepare for retirement, we go about it thoughtfully, just like you said, as early as possible to start to put some dollars away as it relates to building for the future. We know one day we want to retire, be it 60, 70, 50, whatever that age is, you have to prepare. And so the difference between, taking that time out to prepare and be thoughtful and put some steps in place versus just kind of, hey, I'm here, at 62, I'm going to retire. It can be a big difference. I've seen people kind of just retire, but also unretire as a result of not being prepared. And so, thinking through things like how much do I need? Do I have enough to last the rest of my life? How am I going to grow this money? What if, inflation rises and, my budget is busted? What can I do? And so some thoughtful planning now can really go a long way to making sure you have a very comfortable retirement lifestyle.
Yeah, you say you watch people unretire. I watch people flunk retirement, either because they didn't have enough resources or they just don't know how to stop working. But retirement and figuring out what you're doing next, there's a lot that's to that. So what I'd love for you to walk us through, if you would, Khomeini, what are the benefits of actually preparing for retirement?
Yeah, and there are a lot of benefits preparing for retirement. But let me share some statistics with you, Rufus, around retirement. And these statistics actually come from the Federal Reserve, a survey they did in 2024. And so as it relates to retirement, they found that 1/3 of Americans have no money, $0 saved for retirement. 1/3 of all Americans. Another stat that they shared was 2/3 of Americans feel they're off track for retirement. And then finally, only 45% of adults said they were comfortable or only slightly comfortable with managing their investments. And when it comes to women, actually that same survey said that only 38% felt that they were comfortable managing their investments. And so kind of the insight around these statistics is that, we have a lot of work to do and there is some opportunity to be able to improve. But, some of the benefits around saving for retirement, number one is financial security. We all want financial security, financial independence. And so with preparation, we can think about things like preparing for the amount of income that we want to have in retirement. Maybe you want, one person may need 10,000, another person may need 3,000. And so making sure you have a steady income flow and preparing for that. So financial security is a big one. Peace of mind, as you plan to prepare for retirement, if you've done the work, you've saved, that you've invested and done the things, when it's time for retirement, you have more peace of mind as a person, as opposed to a person who really hasn't prepared. They're feeling a bit more stressed about their financial future. So that's a benefit. The ability to maintain your desired lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle do you want to have in retirement? When I'm talking to clients and we're talking about retirement, that's one of the things I like to tap into. Let's start thinking about the type of retirement lifestyle that you want. Everybody's different. Some people may want to travel in retirement. Some people may want to do like they may want a house down south and get away from this cold that we have in Chicago. So what is that retirement lifestyle? If you haven't thought about that, give some thought to the type of retirement lifestyle that you want, because that can really kind of dictate how much money you need. Because a person who wants to travel monthly versus a person who wants to travel once a year, they need a different amount of money. So we need to take that in consideration. When you prepare, you potentially have the opportunity to even do early retirement, right? It's not just about, hey, let me retire just, randomly. When you do that preparation, maybe you have an opportunity to save on an accelerated basis. And so now you can actually retire early. So that's a benefit. Tax benefits, when we prepare and when we save and invest, you have plans, everything from 401ks to IRAs, where you can set money aside. And this gives you some tax advantages right now, where you can potentially lower your taxable income, in consultation with your accountant, making sure you're saving in the right plans. But that's a big benefit. Just a few more, Rufus. Protection against, outliving your money. I'll tell you, when I'm meeting with clients and we're talking about retirement, one of the biggest concerns most people have, and they ask me, they say, Khomeini, I do not want to outlive my money. I want to make sure that, if I'm living, I still have money, and I don't want to run out of money. And so preparation helps us to ensure that you don't run out of money and you put a plan together. You may have Social Security and you may have some investments and savings, but if you spend that money too quickly, you certainly can run out of money. And so making sure we do some thoughtful planning now can help ensure that you don't run out of money. And of course, legacy planning, right? We're talking about all the time on Wealth Strategies, saving now for ourselves, but also our family and future generations. And so when you put some thoughtful planning into preparing for retirement, you can, think about legacy planning. Is this 401k? Am I going to spend it all up, or maybe I can pass it to my kids, my grandkids, and just having flexibility and control over your future. It's a lot of benefits around preparing for retirement. So, taking out the time is definitely very important.
This is why talking to you becomes so critical, because each of these things takes us to a whole other step and more shows as you talk about it. I take off a couple of things of importance here. One, the ability to maintain your desired lifestyle.
Huge.
And then not outliving your money. Two very important things. I once worked with someone, I won't say who it was, but she said to me she was going to take a big sum of money and go someplace and sit under trees and just read books for the rest of her life. And one day if she disappeared, that's where she would be. To which I said, nah, I've been around you enough. I know you like drinking Cristal champagne. That ain't going to be enough money that's going to get you through. So it's kind of figuring out what that desired lifestyle is and knowing that you have enough money to live that, or regulating some parts of things depending on when you start to plan for what that's going to be when you stop doing everything else. So a lot in what you shared about the benefits. But even as we think about that, Khomeini, what is it that we can do now? What can our listeners do to start preparing for retirement?
Yeah, right. Rufus, those are definitely important points. And we definitely can do a show probably on each of those different topics. And we will eventually, we'll dive into each of those. And, yeah, and I do ask listeners to continue to give us feedback, because, the first show of the month, we do hot topics and really kind of touch on some of the questions and concerns that listeners have. And so continue to give us that feedback so we can make sure we bring shows that are relevant to what you want to hear. But some of the things that we can do.
Let me throw this to you before you even get there, because an idea came to mind when you were going through those others.
Okay.
We need to talk about reverse mortgages. We need to break that down for people at some point, because that gets advertised a lot. Reverse mortgages and selling life insurance get advertised a lot, and people need to understand those things. So put those in our parking lot to talk about in the future.
Absolutely. We'll do a whole show on it to make sure people understand what it is, what it's not. And if that's something that you want to do, you make sure you know what you're getting into. So absolutely. So appreciate that.
All right.
But yeah, obviously we understand the benefits around preparing for retirement, but what can we do right now, in our space that we're in right now and in our lives? What are some of the things that we can do as it relates to preparing for retirement? And so one of the things that we want to do first, anytime we talk about financial planning, one of the first things or first steps we always take with clients is about really assessing where you are, because you have to know where you are if you want to know how to go somewhere, right? You have to be able to say, hey, GPS, the first thing it does, it needs to know where you are so we can set a course. And so we need to be able to say, let's look at your net worth. So part of assessing your personal situation is looking at your net worth. And what is net worth? People hear that word all the time. So net worth is, thinking about all of the assets that you own. That could be anything from investments to savings to property. And then we think about our liabilities. Liabilities is everything that you owe. Think about credit cards, debt, mortgages. And so the point is, you take your assets, you minus your liabilities, and you get a number. That's called your net worth. The higher that number is, it can dictate to us the closer you are for being prepared for retirement. A lot of time in our early years, that number is negative. And that's not unusual because you're just getting started out. You probably got student loans and other debts. So it's not unusual for it to be negative. But if you're approaching retirement and that net worth is still negative, then you still have a lot of work to do before you can really hang it up, right? And so that's one of the things that we do. And we look at our budget, right? That's one of the things that can help us prepare for retirement. What are you doing with your saving and spending? One of the questions that I ask clients many times, I say, can you describe to me how you save and spend? And most people haven't thought about that. Like, what do you mean? How do you save and you spend? Do you put money aside every paycheck? Do you transfer a little money from your savings? How do you go about your spending? Do you balance a checkbook, or do you just kind of swipe? And so giving a little thought to how we go about our saving and spending can go a long way to really impacting the budget. You want to be able to look at a budget because, are you spending more than you make? If you're spending more than you make, it's going to be very hard to save money and build up for retirement.
No, that's going to be a problem. That's called debt.
That's going to be a problem. And that's also going to lead to more negative net worth, because your debts are going up and your assets are not going up as fast. And so when we work with our clients, we hone in on these different parts to, and these different areas of your finances to make sure that you have a good grasp on what you're doing. And so even if it's not where you want it to be now, we take a snapshot in time and we just try to improve from where we are. That's the biggest thing. Just try to make improvement. Another step we can take so far as preparation right now, Rufus, is really think about setting retirement goals, right? What age do we actually want to retire? That's one of the biggest things, because if you want to retire at 55 as compared to age 70, that's going to be a big difference in the amount of money that you need to have to be able to live on for the rest of your life. And so thinking about the age that you'd like to retire goes a long way in helping us prepare. And again, thinking about that lifestyle that you want to have in retirement, right? Do you want to travel all the time, or are you okay staying closer to home? That's another thing that can impact the amount of money that we need to have for retirement. So another aspect or thing that we can do right now is really think about estimating the expenses that we'll have in retirement. And so a lot of times I'm working with clients and they say, well, I ask them, well, how much money do you want to have in retirement? They say, I don't know. It's a while away. I don't really have an idea. Well, I tell them, think about what you're spending right now, right? So let's think about what you're spending right now. If you're spending $5,000 a month right now, we can do calculations to add inflation onto that. So you don't have to know what that equals in the future, but think about what you're doing right now. And then also we think about those additional expenses you'll have in retirement. One of the biggest expenses in retirement is a lot of times healthcare costs, right? And so we got to be able to plan for that. How is that healthcare going to be paid for? Are you going to be on Medicare? Are you going to be on private insurance? And so we need to be able to plan around that, thinking about your living expenses, food, utilities, activities you want to do, and then of course inflation. And we can have a whole show, about inflation. And actually we did have a whole show about inflation and gas prices and how everything is going up, that can be a shock to the system, for most people. And obviously, it probably is, and it really can impact your retirement, because if you retired last year and you set a budget and now that budget is kind of out the window, hopefully you put some different things in place to be able to kind of weather the storm. So,
yeah, sometimes you can flunk it, or sometimes life can flunk it for you and have to make you make different decisions.
Absolutely. A couple of things that we can do. Obviously we want to create a savings plan. That's extremely important. So thinking about, most jobs, most people will have retirement plans through their jobs, anything from a 401k, 403b, IRA. Are you maximizing the contributions that you can put into that plan? You can put in, 23,000 and some change in most plans, or even 30,000 and some change if you are preparing for retirement, closer to retirement. And so, it's important to be able to maximize the contributions that you're putting into these plans. And then you also get some tax benefits for doing it. And then also coupling with saving, we want to be able to invest, right? Because we want our money to grow for us. And, that's what wealth strategy is about. It's one thing to put your money under the mattress, but it's another thing to be able to put your money in places where it can grow for you. Thinking about stocks, thinking about bonds, thinking about real estate. You want your money to grow for you. I tell my clients, you work hard for your money. So you want your money to work hard for you, because the harder your money works for you, that's the less that you have to kick in. If you're getting an 8% rate of return and, year after year, just hypothetically, versus, if you're not earning any interest because that money is maybe in the savings or under the mattress, well, that person who's earning 8% is going to have a lot more money for retirement as opposed to that person who, didn't invest that money in ways that they could. So we're going to work with you to make sure that you invest wisely and make sure that it matches up to the amount of risk that you want to take. So the different investments have different amounts of risk. So we want to make sure that it matches up and make sure that it makes sense for you. Of course, when we set up a plan, we want to be able to come back to the table to review that plan. We don't want to just set it and forget it. We want to come back to the table because, things change, life happens and, things change. Maybe you have an additional kid, maybe you have grandkids, maybe you're saving for college. So all of these things affect our planning. And so we want to make sure we can adjust our plans along the way and think about things like, Social Security, right? What can we do now? We can look into Social Security, research our benefit, based on how much you paid in Social Security, how much are you going to be getting out, right? That's another thing we can do. And as it relates to planning for retirement, look into those aspects of the income that you'll receive. So pension plans, Social Security, any type of income that's coming to you, know what it is and be able to do research on it and think about other ways that you can supplement that income, because maybe Social Security is not going to be enough. And so maybe you need to think about trying to find some passive income, maybe through investing in stock dividends or rental property to be able to make ends meet. And that's okay. Think about that as part of your long-term strategy. And, if you don't want to invest, maybe you work part-time to be able to supplement and make some more money. But, these things are very important when it comes to just really trying to prepare for retirement and steps that we can take right now.
Sounds good. A lot to be done. We also should talk about what we do with estate planning. What comes next is also part of the process.
Yeah, I tell people, when people are preparing for retirement, it's a good time to kind of look at your estate plan overall. We got, several attorneys who come on, the station and talk about estate planning. And that's important. That kind of can couple with retirement so far as planning for the future. And so getting a jump start on your estate plan is important, in consultation with your attorney, looking at your wills, looking at your trust, just making sure that everything is kind of bundled up in preparation for retirement. So we have a checklist that we work with our clients to make sure that, we checked off all these things. Like you looked at your healthcare, you looked at your estate plan, you look at your savings, look at your investments. So, people can reach out and talk to us and go over this checklist as it relates to making sure that you are prepared for retirement too.
Really important stuff. Now that we're out of time, tell us what we're talking about next week, Khomeini.
So next week, we are talking about planning for college and beyond. So you put that out there, Rufus. You said we need to do a show on planning for college. So we're doing it next week. We're talking about planning for college and beyond.
Yeah, just like retirement, once you make $1, you need to start planning for it. Once you have a child, you need to start planning for this as well. So, yeah, we got to have this conversation. Look, folks, Khomeini is always giving us good information. Today gave us a whole lot to bite on, to chew on, and to really discuss. If you need to reach him, call him. He's at 630-575-5046, 630-575-5046. You can also go to the website. It's WVONwealthshow.com. Fill out a contact card or complete the Discovery Financial Survey to get started today. It's 630-575-5046 or WVONwealthshow.com. Khomeini?
Thank you, Rufus. I appreciate it. And again, I thank the listeners listening in today. We're going to continue to share important ideas and strategies around building wealth. And until next week, reach out to us. We're happy to do a consultation with you to make sure that we get you and your family prepared for retirement. So thanks, Rufus.
There you have it. Equitable Advisors, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC, a broker-dealer. Equitable Advisors, LLC, and SEC registered investment advisor. Khomeini Khan, look forward to talking to you again next week. Always good stuff.
Thank you, sir.
Be well, my friend. We're going to leave it right there for today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I don't think I took one call today. I didn't respond to one thing on Facebook. It was just that kind of day. But I hope you got a lot out of it. I certainly did. We're going to do it again tomorrow. Hopefully, maybe we'll have time to take calls, but nonetheless, we're going to try not to waste a moment of your time. Annette, thank you so much, as always, for giving us all the information that gets us through the day. And Titus, thanks for keeping all these things together. Oh, by the way, tomorrow, we are going to have a great show. I know we've got one conversation. We're talking with Sandra Bland's family and the producers of the movie Sandra Bland. That'll be part of our Friday lineup. And we'll talk to Cannon Lambert, who is the attorney on the Sandra Bland, her whole situation, who knows everything about it. So make sure you tune in for that. And as you go through the day, you will come across people who are dealing with things that you know absolutely nothing about. So please be kind always. And with that, Annette, tell us what's in the headlines. And T-Dub, take us home.
Cloudy and brisk on this Tuesday, March 24th, 2026. I'm Annette Flournoy, and in the headlines, topping our news. Interim Chicago Public Schools CEO Dr. Macqueline King sat down for an exclusive with WVON's Rufus Williams this morning about some of her biggest challenges and successes. The Chicago Transit Authority is heading to court today to fight to restore billions of federal funding now on hold. And Tiger Woods is returning to the green. He's set to play in match 2 of the Top Golf League final. National news from the Black Information Network is next on Chicago's original social media platform, WVON 1690 AM Berwyn, Chicago. It's 9:04.
BIM News Now. An Air Canada Express jet hit a Port Authority rescue truck while landing at LaGuardia Airport, killing the pilot and co-pilot. An air traffic controller appeared to admit he messed up in the heat of the moment.
That wasn't good.